The morning sun rose slowly over the mountains of trash that stretched as far as the eyes could see. The air smelled of smoke and decay, mixed with the sharp sting of plastic burning somewhere nearby. Among the piles of waste, a small figure moved carefully, her bare feet stepping over old cans and torn bags. Her name was Maria, and this place was her home. Maria had lived her whole life in the dump site. To her it wasn't strange anymore, and it was normal. Every day she woke up to the sounds of crows fighting over food scraps, the laughter of children playing with broken toys, and the clang of bottles hitting old metal carts. The dump was alive in its own sad way. People were everywhere, searching through the waste to find something they could sell. Plastic, paper, bottles, or anything worth a few coins. Maria was only 10 years old, but her small hands already knew how to sort trash faster than many adults. Her mother had taught her how to spot the good kind of plastic, the kind that buyers liked best. They filled large sacks and dragged them to a small hut made of wood and rusted tin sheets. That hut was their home. It had no floor, no electricity, and no door. At night, they hung an old piece of cloth to keep out the mosquitoes and stray dogs. Her mother always smiled even when there was no food left. She would tell Maria, "Don't be sad, my girl. Tomorrow we'll find something better." And every time she said that, Maria believed her. Maria didn't go to school. She had never even held a new book in her hands. But she was curious about everything. Sometimes, when she found old torn papers in the trash, pages from notebooks, magazines, or school books, she would keep them. She couldn't read most of the words, but she liked looking at them. The letters looked like tiny shapes full of secrets she wanted to understand. One afternoon, while searching through a new pile of trash that a big truck had just dumped, she found something special. It was an old notebook, its cover stained and pages half wet from the rain. The name of the owner was written on the front, but Maria didn't know how to read it. Still, she opened the notebook and began flipping through the pages. Inside were neat, careful writing, small drawings, and lists of strange words. She didn't understand them, but she could feel they were important. She sat there for a while on top of the pile, turning the pages slowly. The notebook had a strange effect on her. For the first time, she wondered what it would feel like to write like that, to have thoughts, ideas, and dreams written down for someone to see. When her mother called her to come home, Maria hid the notebook inside her shirt and carried it back. That night, while her mother cooked a small pot of rice mixed with salt and water, Maria pulled out the notebook and placed it beside her. "What's that?" her mother asked. "It's a notebook, Mama. It's full of words. I think it belonged to a student." Her mother smiled weakly. "Maybe you'll be a student one day." Maria looked up at her. "Do you think I can?" "Why not?" her mother said softly. "You're smart, Maria, smarter than this place." Her mother's words stayed in her heart. That night, when everyone else was asleep, Maria sat near the candlelight and stared at the notebook again. She traced her finger over the words, whispering the letters she recognized from a few posters she had seen near the junkyard gates. She didn't know their meaning, but she liked their shape and sound. Every day after that, Maria took a little time to study her notebook. Sometimes she would find broken pencils among the trash and use them to copy the letters she saw. She practiced writing them on small pieces of paper she found. The children around her laughed when they saw her scribbling. "Why are you wasting time with that?" one of them asked. "It won't give you money." Maria didn't answer. She just smiled and went on with her writing. For her, those few quiet minutes with her notebook were a small escape, a way to dream of something bigger than the dump. Days turned into weeks, and the rainy season arrived. The dump site became a river of mud. The piles of garbage turned soft and heavy. The smell grew worse. People slipped and fell as they searched through the piles. The cold wind cut through Maria's thin clothes, but she still went out every day with her sack and her stick, searching for recyclables. Her mother's health began to fade. The constant smoke and the dirty air made her cough often. Sometimes Maria would wake up at night and hear her mother gasping for breath. Still, her mother refused to rest. "If we stop working, we don't eat," she would say. One day, while sorting through a pile of old bottles, Maria met a kind-looking man wearing a white shirt and a hat. He was part of a small charity group that often brought food and supplies to the dump community. He smiled at her and handed her a piece of bread. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maria," she said shyly. "And how old are you?" "I think 10, she replied, though she wasn't really sure. The man nodded. "Do you go to school?" Maria shook her head. "No, we can't. I help Mama." He looked sad for a moment. Then he said, "Would you like to learn how to read?" Her eyes brightened. "Yes." "I really would," he smiled again. "We have a small class near the chapel every Sunday. You can come if you want. It's free." Maria didn't know what to say. She looked at the bread in her hand, then back at him. "But I have to help my mother." "Bring her too," the man said kindly. "You both are welcome." That Sunday, Maria went to the small class under a makeshift tent beside the chapel. There were other children there too, all from the dump site. Some were younger than her, some older. The volunteer teacher was patient and kind. She taught them the alphabet using old cardboard pieces and colorful drawings. Maria listened carefully. Each letter felt like a treasure. She practiced writing them on her notebook later that night, whispering their sounds to herself. B, C. Her mother watched her from the side and smiled. "You're really learning," she said softly. Maria felt proud. For the first time in her life, she felt that she was moving toward something, even if she didn't know what it was yet. The more she learned, the more she wanted to know. She began reading small signs around the area, store names, posters, even labels on plastic bottles. Every word she understood made her heart jump, but life in the dump was never easy for long. One morning, their small hut caught fire when a nearby pile of burning plastic spread. The flames moved quickly and the smoke filled the air. Maria and her mother managed to escape, but everything they owned was gone. Their sacks, clothes, and even the precious notebook. Maria cried that night, sitting beside her mother on the cold ground. Her mother hugged her and whispered, "It's okay, my girl. Things can be lost, but not what's inside your mind. You can learn again." Maria nodded, wiping her tears. Deep down, she promised herself she would never stop learning, not even if the world burned around her. The next morning, she went back to the class near the chapel. When the teacher saw her clothes covered in soot and her eyes swollen from crying, she didn't ask questions. She simply gave Maria another notebook and said, "Start again." Maria held the notebook close to her chest. It wasn't just paper and words anymore. It was hope. That night, she wrote her name for the first time, slowly, carefully, shaping each letter until it looked right. When she finished, she stared at it for a long time. Her name written by her own hand. In that small moment, surrounded by darkness and the faint smell of smoke, Maria felt something she had never felt before. The quiet power of believing in herself. The dump around her was still dirty, noisy, and full of pain. But inside her heart, something had changed. The world no longer seemed as small as it once did. She had no idea that this small spark, this love for learning, would one day lead her to something much greater. Something that would not only change her life, but the lives of many others. For now, she was just a girl from the dump, holding on to a dream that no one else could see. But that dream was alive, and it was growing stronger every single day. Maria woke up to the sound of roosters and the distant rumble of trucks heading toward the dump site. The air was cold and a thin fog covered the piles of garbage like a blanket. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked at her mother, who was already up, coughing softly as she packed their things into a plastic sack. "Come on, my girl," her mother said, her voice weak but gentle. "We need to start early today." Maria nodded, though her body still ached from the long hours they worked the day before. She picked up her stick and followed her mother through the narrow paths between the mounds of waste. Around them, other families were already busy. Some were digging through bags, others pulling carts filled with bottles and cans. It was another ordinary day in a place where every sunrise meant another battle for survival. But something inside Maria was changing. Ever since she started going to the Sunday classes, her eyes saw things differently. She no longer looked at the dump only as a place to live. She began to notice details. The letters printed on boxes, the words on old wrappers. She tried to read them, even when she couldn't fully understand. Each word felt like a small puzzle waiting for her to solve. After hours of collecting recyclables, Maria and her mother rested under a small piece of shade made from an old tarpaulin. Her mother looked tired, her face thin and pale, but she still smiled when Maria began writing letters in the dirt with a stick. "What are you writing?" her mother asked, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Words I learned last Sunday," Maria said proudly. "Today I'm writing the word hope." Her mother chuckled softly. "That's a good word to know, Maria. You'll need it in life." Maria smiled and went back to tracing letters in the ground. That one word, hope, became her favorite. In the evenings, Maria continued attending the small class beside the chapel. Sometimes she brought her mother, who would sit nearby and listen while resting her tired legs. The teacher often brought books and colored papers. Maria was shy at first, but soon she started asking questions and helping younger children with their letters. The teacher noticed her curiosity and told her, "You have a quick mind, Maria. Don't stop learning, no matter what." Maria took those words to heart. One Sunday afternoon, while class was ending, the teacher handed her a small gift, an old, used book with a torn cover. "It's a storybook," she said. "I think you'll like it." Maria's eyes widened as she accepted it carefully as if it were made of gold. She didn't understand all the words yet, but the pictures told her enough to imagine the story. That night by candlelight, she studied each page, whispering the words she recognized and guessing the rest. Her mother watched her with quiet pride. "You remind me of your father," she said suddenly. Maria looked up. "My father?" Her mother nodded slowly. "He loved to read, too. Before he passed, he used to tell me stories every night. You were too young to remember." Maria felt a warm ache in her chest. "I wish I remembered him," she said softly. Her mother reached over and stroked her hair. "He would be proud of you." The days passed and life went on in its usual rhythm. The dump was noisy, hot, and full of danger, but Maria kept her dream alive. Whenever she found broken pencils, she saved them. Whenever she saw words, she tried to read them. Her friends still teased her, but she didn't mind anymore. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. While searching through a pile of discarded boxes, Maria found a large, colorful poster. It showed a bright, clean school building and a smiling group of students wearing uniforms. At the bottom of the poster were words she couldn't fully read, but one of them she recognized: school. She stared at it for a long time. She had seen children wearing uniforms before, walking past the dump on their way to the city school. They always looked neat and happy, so different from her world. Maria felt a strange mix of envy and longing. For the first time, she whispered to herself, "One day I'll wear a uniform too." Later that day, she showed the poster to her teacher. The teacher looked at her thoughtfully and said, "If you really want to go to school, Maria, I can help you. But it won't be easy." Maria's heart skipped a beat. "I'll do anything," she said quickly. "Then study hard. Learn to read faster, and keep believing in yourself." Maria nodded with determination. From that day, she began to study more seriously. Every night after helping her mother with chores, she practiced reading aloud until her voice grew tired. The teacher gave her extra lessons, teaching her how to spell and count. Slowly, she improved. Months passed, and Maria's progress amazed everyone. Even the older children who used to mock her started asking her to teach them some words. She helped them kindly, never showing pride, only gratitude. But life in the dump site had its own way of testing people. One rainy night, Maria's mother's cough worsened. The rain leaked through their roof, soaking their clothes and blankets. Maria tried to cover her mother with a plastic sheet, but her mother's breathing became heavy and weak. In the morning, Maria begged for help. A neighbor helped her bring her mother to a small clinic run by volunteers. The nurse gave her medicine and told Maria that her mother needed rest and clean air, something hard to find in the dump. For the next few weeks, Maria took care of her mother while still attending her Sunday classes. She did her best to balance both. Sometimes she would come to class late, her clothes dirty from work, but her teacher never scolded her. Instead, she always greeted her with a warm smile and said, "I'm glad you're here." One afternoon, while collecting bottles, Maria saw the man in the white shirt again, the same man who had first invited her to the class. He was talking to a group of volunteers near a truck filled with supplies. When he noticed Maria, he waved her over. "Maria."
"How are you?"
he asked kindly. "I'm fine, sir," she said. "My mother is sick, but she's getting better." He looked concerned. "I'm sorry to hear that." "You've been studying well, I hear." Maria nodded shyly. "Yes, I want to go to school one day." The man smiled. "That's a good dream, Maria. Keep it alive. You never know who's watching and willing to help." She didn't fully understand what he meant, but his words stayed with her. A few weeks later, the charity group organized a small event at the chapel, a celebration for the children who had completed the basic reading program. Maria was among them. She received a small certificate and a second-hand backpack filled with school supplies. It wasn't much, but to her it felt like winning a treasure. When she showed the backpack to her mother, tears filled her mother's eyes. "I'm so proud of you, my girl," she whispered. That night, Maria sat outside their hut staring at the stars. The dump around her was quiet except for the soft crackle of burning trash in the distance. She hugged the backpack tightly and made a silent promise to herself that she would use it one day for real school books, not just scraps of paper. Then, one day, life shifted again. Maria was walking home from the chapel class when she heard a loud crash near one of the garbage trucks. A few seconds later, people started shouting. A small boy had fallen into a deep pit where the waste was burning underneath. The smoke was thick and the boy's cries for help echoed through the air. Without thinking, Maria dropped her bag and ran. Her teacher shouted for her to stop, but she didn't listen. She crawled toward the pit, covering her mouth with her arm. The smoke burned her eyes, but she could see the boy struggling, his small hands reaching out. Maria grabbed a long stick and tried to pull him up, but it was too short. She didn't hesitate. She climbed down, her feet sinking into the hot, soft ground. The smell was terrible and the heat stung her skin, but she reached the boy and pushed him upward, shouting, "Hold on!" With help from others, the boy was pulled to safety. Then they helped Maria out, coughing and covered in soot. The people around her clapped and cheered. Someone shouted, "She saved him! The dump girl saved him!" Maria stood there trembling, her chest burning from the smoke. She didn't feel like a hero. She was just glad the boy was alive. But the moment would change everything. A few days later, the story spread around the community. Volunteers came to visit Maria and her mother, bringing food and medicine. A reporter even came to take pictures and write about what happened. Maria didn't understand why everyone made such a big deal. To her, it was simple. Someone needed help, and she helped. But that act of courage would soon open doors she never imagined possible. That was the day when everything quietly began to change. For a few days after the accident, the dump site felt different. People spoke in hushed tones about the brave little girl who had saved a boy from the fire. Some smiled at Maria when she passed by. Others simply nodded with quiet respect. She wasn't used to being noticed, and all the attention made her feel shy. Her mother was proud, though still weak from illness. "You have a brave heart, my girl," she told Maria. "I always knew it." Maria didn't see herself as brave. She hadn't thought before jumping in. She had just seen someone in trouble and acted. But that one act was enough to change the direction of her life. A few days later, the man in the white shirt came back to the dump site, this time with another woman who carried a camera and a clipboard. They spoke to Maria's mother for a long time. The man explained that the local newspaper wanted to share Maria's story, not to show pity, but to inspire others. Maria's mother hesitated at first. She didn't want her daughter to be treated like a charity case, but the man promised they would tell the story respectfully, showing her courage and her love for learning. Finally, she agreed. The next morning, Maria wore her cleanest clothes, a faded pink shirt and patched skirt, and sat beside her mother while the reporter asked gentle questions. "Why did you do it, Maria?" The woman asked kindly. Maria looked down for a moment before answering. "Because he needed help," she said simply. "If it were me, I hope someone would help me too." The reporter smiled softly. "That's very brave. You could have been hurt," Maria shrugged. "It doesn't matter. He's alive." They took a few photos, Maria standing near the place where the fire happened, smiling shyly, holding her notebook close to her chest. To her it felt strange but also exciting. A week later, her story appeared in a small newspaper with the headline, "Dump Girl Saves Boy from Fire." The article spoke about her courage, her life in the dump site, and her dream of going to school. Maria didn't even see the newspaper first. It was the teacher from the chapel who brought it to class. "Look, Maria," she said with a proud smile. "You're famous now." The other children gathered around, pointing and laughing in amazement. Maria blushed, covering her face with her hands. "I don't want to be famous," she said softly. "I just want to learn." But fame, even the small kind, has a way of reaching unexpected places. Within days, people from the city began to visit the dump site. Volunteers, journalists, and even a few strangers who wanted to meet the girl from the newspaper. Some brought food, clothes, and school supplies. Others came just to shake her hand. One afternoon, a woman in a neat dress approached Maria and her mother. She introduced herself as a member of a foundation that helped children get an education. "We read about you," she said. "We'd like to offer you a scholarship." Maria's eyes widened. "A scholarship?" "Yes," the woman said warmly. "It means we'll help you go to school. We'll take care of your fees, books, and uniform. All you have to do is study hard." Maria's mother was speechless. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you, ma'am." That night, Maria couldn't sleep. The thought of going to a real school filled her with both excitement and fear. What if she wasn't smart enough? What if the other children laughed at her? She had spent her whole life surrounded by trash. Could she really belong in a classroom? But when morning came, her mother held her hand and said, "Don't be afraid. You've worked hard for this. Be proud." A few days later, Maria stood outside a school building for the first time. It was nothing fancy, just a small public school on the edge of the city. But to her, it felt like stepping into another world. Children in clean uniforms ran around laughing, holding colorful bags and lunchboxes. The smell of chalk and soap filled the air. She clutched her old backpack tightly, trying to hide her nervousness. The foundation woman guided her to her new classroom and introduced her to the teacher. "This is Maria," she said gently. "She's joining your class today." The teacher smiled warmly. "Welcome, Maria. Come, sit down." As she walked to her seat, she felt dozens of eyes on her. Some children whispered, curious about the new girl. She tried to smile but quickly looked down. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her notebook. The lessons were hard at first. She couldn't understand everything the teacher said. Her classmates seemed so quick with answers while she struggled to keep up. But Maria didn't give up. Every night after school, she studied by candlelight, reading and writing until her eyes hurt. Her mother encouraged her, saying, "Slow steps are still steps forward." Days turned into weeks, and slowly she began to improve. Her reading got better, her writing neater, and soon she could follow the lessons with ease. The teacher often praised her for her effort. "You may not have had much before, Maria," she once said, "but you have something rare: determination." One afternoon, during a class project, Maria shared her story with her classmates. She told them about life in the dump site, how she and her mother collected bottles to survive, and how she had once found her first notebook in the trash. The room grew silent. Some children looked surprised. Others looked ashamed, forever whispering about her. After that day, they began treating her differently, not with pity, but with respect. Some even asked her for help with lessons. Maria was no longer the dump girl. She was simply Maria, the brave one, the kind one, the girl who never stopped trying. Outside of school, she continued helping her mother. Even though they still lived near the dump site, their lives felt lighter now. The foundation helped them move into a small rented room not far from the school. It wasn't much, but it was clean, with real walls and a roof that didn't leak when it rained. For the first time, Maria had a real bed. She lay on it that first night, staring at the ceiling in disbelief. "Mama," she whispered, "it feels like we're dreaming." Her mother smiled softly. "It's not a dream, my girl. You made it real." Months passed and Maria's life began to settle into a new rhythm. School in the morning, helping her mother in the evening, studying at night. She still visited the dump site sometimes, not to scavenge, but to see the children she grew up with. She told them stories, brought them books, and encouraged them to come to the chapel classes. "If I can learn," she would tell them, "you can too." One day during a school assembly, the principal called her name. Maria walked nervously to the stage as everyone clapped. "This award," the principal said, "is for courage and perseverance. Maria has shown us that where you come from doesn't define who you are." The applause was loud. Maria felt her heart swell with emotion. She looked out into the crowd and saw her mother wiping tears from her eyes. That evening, as they walked home hand in hand, her mother said quietly, "You've changed. Maria, you're growing into someone strong." Maria smiled. "I just want to help others like us one day." Her mother nodded. "And you will. I believe it." But life wasn't done testing them. One rainy season, the dump site flooded badly. Water mixed with garbage swept through the area, destroying makeshift homes and washing away what little people owned. Maria and her mother rushed to help their old neighbors, carrying food and water. She saw children shivering in the cold, families sitting on muddy ground with nowhere to go. That night, while helping hand out blankets from the charity group, Maria felt something deep inside her, a pull, a purpose. She realized that her dream wasn't just about getting out of the dump. It was about going back one day to make it better. That thought stayed with her for years. Her journey had only begun, but the spark inside her was now a fire. She had gone from being a nameless child in the garbage to a student with dreams, and though she didn't know it yet, her story was far from over. There were still many challenges ahead, moments of pain, doubt, and loss, but also new beginnings that would lead her to become something extraordinary. For now, Maria continued to study, work hard, and help where she could. The world around her was still rough, but she had changed how she saw it. What once looked like endless piles of trash now looked like possibilities, things waiting to be rebuilt, renewed, transformed. The dump girl had found her light, and little by little that light was beginning to shine beyond the mountains of waste, reaching hearts she didn't even know she'd touched. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the day her life had changed forever was only the beginning of a much bigger story. Years passed, and Maria was no longer the shy girl who once hid behind piles of trash. She had grown taller, her face brighter, her eyes full of quiet strength. The little girl from the dump site had become a young woman with purpose. Her days were busy now. Every morning she woke before sunrise to prepare for school, and every evening she helped her mother with chores or joined volunteer groups that came to help families in the dump. Even though her life had changed, Maria never forgot where she came from. The smell, the sounds, the people, all of it stayed in her heart. By the time she finished high school, Maria had become one of the top students in her class. Her teachers admired her dedication. She never complained even when things got hard. While her classmates went home to comfortable houses, Maria still lived in a small rented room with her mother. It was better than the dump site, but they still struggled. When the final exams were over, Maria was nervous about what came next. She dreamed of going to college, but she knew it would be expensive. Her mother's health was still fragile, and Maria often wondered if she should start working instead. One evening, as she sat outside their small room, her mother joined her. The air smelled of rain, and the sound of distant laughter came from the nearby street. "You've been quiet lately," her mother said softly. Maria nodded. "I'm thinking, Mama, about school, about what to do next." Her mother smiled, though her eyes looked tired. "You've always wanted to study more, haven't you?" Maria looked down. "Yes, but we don't have enough money. Maybe I should find a job instead." Her mother shook her head firmly. "No, my girl. You were meant for something bigger. Don't stop now. You've already come so far. There will be a way." Maria looked at her mother's thin hands, worn from years of hard work, and her heart ached. She wanted to make things easier for her. A week later, something unexpected happened. Maria received a letter from the same foundation that had helped her before. It said she had been chosen for a full college scholarship, everything paid for. She was invited to study environmental science at a university in the city. Maria couldn't believe it. She read the letter again and again, her hands shaking. Tears filled her eyes as she showed it to her mother. "You see," her mother said, smiling proudly. "I told you there would be a way." That night they celebrated with a simple meal, rice and a small piece of fish. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like a feast. College was a completely new world for Maria. The campus was big and clean, filled with students from different places. Everyone seemed confident, walking quickly with books in their hands. At first, Maria felt out of place. She wore old clothes, carried a second-hand bag, and spoke softly, afraid of being judged. But soon her passion for learning helped her find her place. She loved her subjects, especially the ones about nature and how to protect the environment. She listened carefully to every lecture, took detailed notes, and asked questions that surprised her teachers. Some classmates noticed how hardworking she was. Slowly, she began making friends, students who admired her determination. They didn't know much about her past, but they saw her kindness and sincerity. In her free time, Maria joined community programs that helped poor areas clean up waste. Whenever she visited neighborhoods that reminded her of the dump site, her heart felt heavy but also determined. She wanted to find real solutions, ways to turn trash into something useful, ways to keep children from growing up in the same pain she did. She spent her weekends volunteering at recycling drives and environmental cleanups. The smell of garbage didn't bother her anymore. She had lived with it all her life. What mattered to her now was finding hope in it, the same hope she once found in a torn notebook. One day, her professor gave them a project about sustainable waste management. While others focused on research and data, Maria decided to do something different. She wanted to return to her old home and the dump site and study how the people there lived and worked. It had been years since she left, but she never forgot the way. When she arrived, her heart tightened. The place looked almost the same. Mountains of trash, smoke rising from burning piles, and people walking barefoot searching for recyclables. Children still played in the dirt, just like she once did. Some of the older scavengers recognized her. "Maria, is that you?" one woman asked, smiling in disbelief. Maria nodded, hugging her tightly. "It's me. I came to visit." They talked for hours. Maria listened to their stories, took notes, and asked about their struggles. Nothing had changed much. They still faced hunger, sickness, and lack of opportunity. That night, as she rode back to the city, tears ran down her cheeks. She promised herself that once she finished her studies, she would come back to make things better. Months later, she presented her project in class. She spoke passionately about how waste could be turned into energy, how recycling could create jobs, and how people living in dump sites deserved support and respect. When she finished, the whole room was silent. Then her classmates began to clap. Her professor smiled and said, "Maria, your story and your ideas are powerful. You're not just talking about change, you're living it." Those words stayed with her. By her final year in college, Maria's story had spread again, this time among the academic community. A small organization offered to fund her plan to start a community recycling center near the dump site. It would provide jobs, reduce waste, and help children go to school. She could hardly believe it. The girl who once picked up bottles for food was now leading a project to transform waste into something that could change lives. When she graduated, she wore a cap and gown that felt heavy with meaning. As she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she spotted her mother sitting in the crowd, wiping tears with the corner of her handkerchief. After the ceremony, Maria ran to her and hugged her tightly. "We did it, Mama," she whispered. Her mother smiled, her eyes glistening. "No, my girl, you did it." Not long after graduation, Maria started working on her dream project. She partnered with the foundation and local volunteers. They built a small facility near the dump site, a recycling center that turned waste materials into products like tiles, bricks, and fuel. She trained the people there to manage it, giving them steady work and dignity. The children she once played with were now grown up, and many of them joined her team. They called her Ate Maria, Big Sister Maria. She laughed and worked alongside them, never acting like she was above anyone. Every morning she arrived early, walking through the familiar smell of earth and smoke, but now it didn't make her sad. It reminded her of how far she had come. She spoke to the children about school, handed out notebooks, and told them stories about her journey. "Education can change everything," she would tell them. "It changed me. It can change you too." People from the city started visiting to see the project. Some came to interview her. Others came to volunteer. The small recycling center grew into a bigger one. Soon it became known as one of the most successful community-led waste programs in the region. One afternoon, as the sun set behind the mountains of trash, Maria stood outside the center, watching the workers laugh and talk as they finished for the day. The sky glowed orange, and for a moment everything felt peaceful. Her mother, now older and frail, sat nearby, smiling proudly. "You did it, Maria," she said softly. "You brought life back to this place." Maria looked around and nodded. "We all did, Mama. Together." The dump that once symbolized pain and poverty had turned into a place of hope. Not perfect, but alive with possibility. That night, as Maria walked home, she thought about her younger self, the barefoot girl who used to dig through trash, dreaming of a better life. She smiled, realizing that the dream had come true, not just for her but for many others. Still, she knew her journey wasn't over. There were more communities to help, more children to reach, and more stories waiting to change. But for now, under the quiet stars and the soft hum of the city in the distance, Maria felt something she had longed for all her life: peace. She had turned her pain into purpose, her struggle into strength, and her story into hope. And deep in her heart, She knew that the dump girl was gone, but the hero she became was just beginning to rise. Years passed again, and Maria's name became known far beyond the small dump site where she was born. Her recycling project had grown into a movement. People from other towns came to learn from her, inspired by how she turned what others called garbage into something that gave people life and hope. But to Maria, none of it felt like fame or success. It felt like responsibility, a promise she had made long ago to the little girl she once was. She never wanted to forget her roots or the people who had shaped her journey. Every morning, Maria still walked through the community with the same gentle smile, greeting the workers, asking about their families, checking the machines, and making sure the children went to school. She treated everyone equally. No one was too poor or too small to matter. That was how she believed change truly began. Her mother still lived with her in a modest house not far from the center. Though her health had weakened over time, she remained Maria's greatest supporter. Each evening they would sit outside, watching the sky turn gold and orange. Her mother often said, "You gave me more than I ever dreamed, my girl. You gave me peace." Maria would smile and hold her hand. "You gave me courage, Mama. Without you, I'd still be lost." The recycling center had expanded into several parts now: a workshop, a classroom for children, and a small library. The classroom was Maria's favorite place. She filled it with books, posters, and pictures of young children smiling with their certificates. Every week she taught lessons on the environment, kindness, and hope. She told them stories, not from textbooks, but from life. One afternoon, as she taught the children about how small actions could make big changes, a boy raised his hand. "Teacher," he said shyly, "is it true that you used to live in the dump too?" Maria smiled softly. "Yes," she said. "That's where I was born. I used to collect bottles and cans just like your parents do now." The boy's eyes widened. "And now you're the boss?" The class laughed, but Maria shook her head. "No, I'm not the boss. I'm just someone who refused to give up. You can be anything too if you believe and keep learning." The children clapped, their faces glowing with excitement. For them, Maria wasn't just a teacher. She was proof that dreams could come true, even in the hardest places. Over time, Maria began to receive invitations to speak at schools and community events in the city. At first, she was nervous. She had never liked being the center of attention. But when she stood before those crowds, she spoke from her heart. She told her story simply, about the little girl who found a notebook in the trash, who learned to read under candlelight, who saved a boy from fire, and who turned her pain into purpose. People always listened in silence. Some cried, others clapped. After every talk, people would come up to her and say how her words touched their hearts. Some even donated to her projects. But what meant the most to Maria were the letters from children who said they wanted to be like her. Kind, brave, and hopeful. Still, life had its quiet sorrows too. One cold morning, Maria woke up to find her mother weaker than usual. She refused to eat and spoke only in a whisper. Maria stayed by her side all day, holding her hand, trying not to cry. "Don't be sad, my girl." Her mother said softly, "I've lived long enough to see your dreams come true. I can rest happy now." "Don't say that," Maria whispered, her voice breaking. "I still need you." Her mother smiled faintly. "You'll always have me here," she said, pressing Maria's chest with her trembling fingers. "In your heart." That night, her mother quietly passed away in her sleep, her face peaceful, as if she were dreaming. The days that followed were heavy and quiet. Maria continued her work, but the laughter in her eyes dimmed for a while. She missed her mother's voice, her stories, her gentle hands. The world felt emptier without her. But one evening, as she sat alone in their small garden, Maria looked up at the stars and remembered her mother's words. She realized that grief, like everything else in her life, could be turned into something meaningful. She decided to dedicate her next project to her mother, a training program that would help women in poor communities start small recycling businesses. She called it the Hope Project because that was what her mother had given her all her life. Months later, the Hope Project became one of her proudest achievements. It gave jobs to hundreds of women, allowing them to support their families and send their children to school. Maria watched them grow, learn, and lead, and it filled her heart with warmth.